Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the GSMC Hockey Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Garrison McDaniel, and we have a great show for you guys today as we are one day away from the Stanley Cup Final tomorrow night. Can't be any more excited for it. I've been in anticipation all week. Of course, you guys know this. All three of my shows have basically just been previewing the Stanley Cup Finals as we have so much to go over before we get into it. And then, of course, when the games start getting played, so much in-depth analysis. This is a fantastic time to be a hockey fan and be a part of the hockey world. So I'm very excited to get right into this show today where we have a great one. The first segment today will be me breaking down the lines for each team, who has the advantage when you're just looking at the teams on paper. Of course, hockey games aren't played on paper, but all we have to go off right now is the on paper that both of these teams show. So I'm excited to talk about that. My second segment will be me talking about the top 10 players in the Stanley Cup Final, as I rank them 1 to 10, who is most important for each team and who are the best players overall for the Stanley Cup Final. The third segment will be how each team was assembled to get to this point in the Stanley Cup Finals. I love looking at how teams were assembled and what moves general managers were able to make to get to this product that they see on the ice, get it to the point that it's at. Our fourth and penultimate segment of the week and of the night will be the top storylines in the Stanley Cup Finals, and then our fifth and final segment will finish off by talking about my predictions for the Stanley Cup Finals. I've been keeping you guys a little bit in anticipation as I haven't given them out yet, but today will be when I do it in that fifth and final segment before I send you guys off to watch it tomorrow, and I surely am so excited for that. But before we get into all that, as always, if you would like to become a bigger part of the show, make your voice heard, ask me any questions, then use the tips and donations link at gsmcpodcast.net. It goes a long way to support all the creators here at the GSMC Podcast Network. So if you guys will, it's the gsmcpodcast.net that you see on the screen right now. And without further ado, as always, we'll get right into our first segment of the night, me talking about the lines breakdown for the Stanley Cup Final. And both these teams are fantastic teams. You don't get to this point without being a fantastic team, of course. But we're going to start with who the team that on paper I believe is the better team is the Florida Panthers. Carter Verhaeghe, Alexander Barkov make up their first line. Carter Verhaeghe, Alexander Barkov, and Sam Reinhart make up their first line. Their second line then is Matthew Tkachuk, Sam Bennett, Evan Rodriguez, Eetu Luostarinen, Anton Lundell, Vladimir Tarasenko is their third line. Then Steven Lorentz, Kevin Senlin, and Kyle Okposo finish off their forward group in that fourth line. Talking a little bit about that first line, how well it works together. First off, you have three pretty great defensive-minded forwards. Alexander Barkov winning the Selke, Sam Reinhart's a big body on that right wing, and Carter Verhaeghe plays amazing in the defensive zone, a very fast player as well. So those three really are a fantastic first line. Both ends of the ice, they play such a great 200-foot game. And when you see in this series, the Florida Panthers, they're going to, of course, shorten their bench a little bit, play three lines, probably skipping this Steven Lorentz and Kevin Stenlund. What we'll see is probably first line go, second line go, and then third line, then first line, second line, then maybe fourth line, first line, second line, third line, something like that. Or they'll just run first line, second line, third line, first line, second line, first line, second line, third line, something like that, kind of double shifting these top two lines, because that is the strength of this team. Of course, when you have Vladimir Tarasenko on the third line, Anton Lundell has been a fantastic player for them all season long as well, and especially in these playoffs. But when you have the fantastic top two lines that can play this fantastic style of game, of course, Matthew Tkachuk on that second line left wing, Sam Bennett in the middle there, another big body, a great 200-foot player. Evan Rodriguez is another big body. So when you have these guys that can play that 200-foot game on the top two lines, that's who you're going to kind of rely on a little bit when you kind of are in the Stanley Cup Final. And I expect out of the Florida Panthers them to rely on those guys. So I expect a lot of play from Carter Verhaeghe, Alexander Barkov, Sam Reinhart, Matthew Tkachuk, Sam Bennett, and Evan Rodriguez. A lot of these goals are going to come from them, and a lot of these defensive efforts are going to come from them. Of course, their bottom two lines are amazing as well. The depth pieces have kind of what has gotten them to this point, but I do believe that when it comes down to it in the Stanley Cup Finals, they're going to rely on the guys that have done it all season long. And, of course, Sam Reinhart has been, amazing this entire season. So when you're talking about the forwards with the Florida Panthers, and it's kind of going to be the exact same talking about the Edmonton Oilers, a little bit more when we're talking about the Edmonton Oilers, but I can definitely see them shortening the bench a bit, going top two lines a lot, and double shifting these guys. Of course, you're going to need to match Connor McDavid, who's going to be out on the ice. I expect him to be around 25 minutes of ice time a game in this series and in this Stanley Cup Final, because they need him to be the best Connor McDavid we have ever seen. That's going to be a special task for him, and I can't wait to see if he steps up to it. Tomorrow night is going to tell us a lot about how the series is going to play out. The box score is going to be a huge indication to the remainder of this series, this game one in Florida, so I can't wait to see how it plays out. But when we're talking about the defensive pairing for the Florida, this is a big strength in this team. Their tops, all of their 6 defensive players are fantastic. Gustav Forsling and Aaron Ekblad make up your top 2. Gustav Forsling is one of the best defenders in the NHL offensively. I think he had around 70 points in this past season. He played amazing. I think he had a plus 50 or something with his plus minus as well. Always out there when good things happen, and he doesn't give up a lot of goals. Fantastic top 2 defensive pairing here, and Aaron Ekblad and Gustav Forsling. Aaron Ekblad, of course, being injured for most of the season, or not most of the season, but for a large portion of the season. Getting that guy back and healthy has been huge for this Florida Panthers team for this playoff run. Of course, he is their assistant captain as well. So Aaron Ekblad has been such a big key for the Florida Panthers. And then in their middle 2 defensive pairing, you have Nico Mikkola and Brandon Montour. Both of these guys played amazing when the Edmonton Oilers came to town back in November, I believe it was. Or it was the December game that Nico Mikkola had 2 assists, and Brandon Montour, I believe, had 2 points as well in that game. So for these 2 guys, they're going to need to step up. We talk about the defensive producing on the offensive side, and I do believe that could be a huge key in this series as well. Then you have Oliver Ekman-Larsson and Dmitry Kulikov on the bottom 2 defensive pairing. Oliver Ekman-Larsson has been a veteran in the league, mainstay in the NHL for a very long time, has done his job amazingly. When he was on Arizona, he was a 70-point getter for a lot of his career. Of course, it's going down as he's now around 34 years old, if I'm not mistaken, somewhere around that for Oliver Ekman-Larsson. I can actually check here. He's 32 years old, but a fantastic player. Really great on the power play, really good defensively as well. He's one of the best players in the NHL, and all of his stats have always backed that up. This season needing to take a step down a little bit here, now playing on the bottom 2, but he's still producing in his role, and he's still enjoying playing on the bottom pairing with Dmitry Kulikov, who has been a fantastic supplementary defensive partner for Oliver Ekman-Larsson. What he lacks, Dmitry Kulikov makes up for in many ways. So that entire defensive core is really what's gotten the Florida Panthers to where they're at. All 6 of those guys are such a huge key for the Panthers when they're talking both ends of the ice, really. And it is one of the best defensive-minded defensive cores in the NHL as well. And then on the power play, you have on the top line power play, you have Sam Reinhart, Barkov, Carter Verhaeghe, Brandon Montour, and Matthew Tkachuk. This power play line has been amazing. You have your first line out there, and then adding Matthew Tkachuk as he's been playing, I believe he's playing as a shooter, if I'm not mistaken. What I think I've been seeing is Verhaeghe and Tkachuk as shooters, Barkov on net, Sam Reinhart down low with Montour as the quarterback with this power play, but I could be wrong. I do need to look at the film for the Panthers power play a little bit more before tomorrow, but it's been amazing, this power play. It's 6th in the NHL for the postseason, and it was top 10 in the NHL in the regular season. So it's been a great unit. And then their second, you have Bennett, Anton Lundell, Vladimir Tarasenko. This is where Anton Lundell really produces offensively. They go with the one defenseman approach for both power play lines, with OEL as your one defenseman back. Brandon Montour is the one back on the first line power play unit. So you're not seeing Gustav Forsling or Aaron Ekblad on the power play. Them not being out on the ice for that says a lot about what they're trying to do with their top line, with the defense. It is really all about getting shutting it down when you have those guys out on the ice, because they're out on the ice 24-25 minutes a game, and that could be even more. We could be seeing Ekblad and Forsling out there for 30 minutes a night for some of these nights. So when it comes to the penalty kill, it is one of the best penalty kills in hockey. I think it is number 2. It is number 2 in the postseason. It was top 5 of the regular season. Barkov, Reinhart, Mikola, Dmitry Kulikov, and then it's Kevin Stenlund, Eetu Luostarinen, Gustav Forsling, and Aaron Ekblad on the second penalty kill unit. And then, as we all know, Bobrovsky and Anthony Stolarz are your goaltenders. So that is the Florida Panthers. And then when you get over to the Edmonton Oilers, we're talking Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, Connor McDavid, Zach Hyman. That line's been amazing all season long. Of course, they love to split up McDavid and Draisaitl when it's 5-on-5. Have those two fantastic forwards playing on 2 different lines has been very good for them. Dylan Holloway is going to get your second line left wing spot with Evander Kane on Leon Draisaitl's other side. That partnership's been working very well in the regular season. Then you have Warren Foegele, Ryan McLeod, Corey Perry in the third line, Mattias Janmark, Adam Henrique, and Connor Brown on that fourth line. What we're going to be talking about with the Edmonton Oilers is the top 2 lines are going to be on the ice a lot of the time. The bottom 2 lines, the bottom 6 for the Edmonton Oilers, I could see them at less than 10 minutes of ice time a night for both of them. I would be shocked if they get more than that, really. They want McDavid and Draisaitl on the ice as much as possible. And I can't wait to see if they're up for that task, because they're going to need to be if they want to be the Panthers. We're going to the defensive pairing. You have Mattias Ekholm, Evan Bouchard, Darnell Nurse, Cody Ceci, Philip Broberg, and Brett Kulak for the Edmonton Oilers defense. It's not great. They're splitting up for this series. It looks like what they've been doing in practice is splitting up Evan Bouchard and Darnell Nurse. Darnell Nurse making $9.25 million and not making your top 2 defensive pair for Stanley Cup Final is awful. I love to harp on Darnell Nurse because he makes so much money and he's such an underwhelming player every time I watch him. But there's a reason for that. You're on the fourth, or you're on the second line defensive pairing, and you're making $9.25 million. It's a lot different than Leon Draisaitl making 8.25, or he makes 8 something, and he's on the second line. But that's because Connor McDavid is ahead of you, and you definitely could play on that left wing, but you want to split them up. This is different. Darnell Nurse is just not playing good hockey right now. He's amazing defensively, but offensively, he hasn't deserved his spot. And now Mattias Ekholm is going to be playing with Evan Bouchard as that. They're looking to generate offense with that top 2 pairing. Darnell Nurse, Cody Ceci. That's going to be a shutdown defensive pair. Cody Ceci, so great defensively as well. And then Broberg and Kulak probably not going to see too much ice time. They're probably going to be around 10 minutes of ice time each night as well. Their power play, this is where they get a lot going. It's Hyman, Nugent-Hopkins, Draisaitl, McDavid, Bouchard. We talked about their power play in depth on Wednesday. A little breakdown about how they roll with it. Check that segment out from the Wednesday podcast if you want to hear me talk a little bit more about that power play. But it's fantastic for a reason. And then their second power play unit: Corey Perry, Adam Henrique, Evander Kane, Darnell Nurse, Mattias Ekholm. That we don't see it that often because they love to run out that first line power play unit for a lot of the power play time. So we're not going to be really seeing this, but it's really Evander Kane really is what we look out for when this line is out on the ice. The Panthers are going to need to shut him down. He's a fantastic forward. Of course, Evander Kane has always been very good ever since he was on San Jose as well. So their penalty kill, the best in the postseason, 93% penalty kill. They've shut down the last 27 straight power play opportunities from the opposition. So they're looking very good. It's Derek Ryan, Nugent-Hopkins, Ekholm, Cody Ceci. Nugent-Hopkins has really thrived in this postseason, playing on that first line with McDavid and playing on a first line penalty kill and also playing on that first power play unit. I mean, he is a big part of this Edmonton Oilers team, and you can see it with how much that coach trusts him. And then it's McLeod, Henrique, Darnell Nurse, Brett Kulak on the second line penalty kill unit, and then we're going to see Stuart Skinner probably for all games of this Stanley Cup Finals run. So that's what the Edmonton Oilers are looking like when they're matching up against each other. I think that the Edmonton Oilers have the edge when you're looking at the first line. The Edmonton Oilers could have the edge depending on how well Leon Draisaitl is playing on the second line, but the Panthers overall, I think, is a better second line. And then third and fourth line goes to the Panthers, of course, as it is one of their strong suits, is that depth. And then when you're talking about the defense, I think it is going to be very interesting to see how these two defensive cores match up against each other. It's very similar, but in different ways. The second defensive pairing for the Edmonton Oilers is that shutdown. The first defensive pairing for the Panthers is the shutdown. The second for the Panthers is kind of the offensive-minded defenseman, and then the first for the Oilers are the offensive-minded defensemen. So it's a little bit of a switch. They are really good at different roles. Evan Bouchard, of course, being one of the best players of this postseason, has the third most points overall of the postseason, has been such a big piece for the Edmonton Oilers. So I can't wait to see how the defensive cores match up against each other and who gets the edge there. But that'll wrap it up for our first segment of the night, talking about the line breakdowns for the Edmonton Oilers and Florida Panthers. When I get back, we'll be talking about the top 10 players in the Stanley Cup Final.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits, some losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip, you choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Welcome back to the GSMC Hockey Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Garrison McDaniel. We just got finished talking about the lines for the Stanley Cup Final, and now we're going to be going on to the top 10 players in the Stanley Cup Final. But before I get into that, I'd love to remind you guys that if you are enjoying the show, if you want to support me and the creators here at the GSMC Sports Network a little bit more than you guys already do, use the tips and donations link at the GSMCpodcast.net if you want to support the show in more ways than you guys already do. But without further ado, we're going to get into our second segment, me talking about the top 10 players in this Stanley Cup Final. And we're going to get right into it here, talking about the number 10 player, Gustav Forsling. This guy has been an absolute dominant defenseman for the Florida Panthers throughout the regular season. Plus 50, over plus 50 plus minus for this guy. Always out there with good stuff happening. Doesn't give up many goals on the defensive end. He has been fantastic for this Florida Panthers team. And next segment, we're going to be talking about how each team was assembled. They got Gustav Forsling for the Florida Panthers. They got him off of the waivers. Horrible decision. I believe it was the Carolina Hurricanes that had Gustav Forsling before, and they sent him down and let him slip through the cracks. And he's turned into be a top 2 defenseman for the Florida Panthers. Been everything that you could ever hope or want for this team. He's been amazing. Been a force this entire postseason. Has had a great postseason. So for Gustav Forsling, he gets number 10 with an excellent defensive-minded player. And postseason, he has been really helping out Sergei Bobrovsky in front of him. Number 9 is going to be another Florida Panther here. And a key part to this is pay attention to how many Panthers and Oilers players I have on this list here. It's a little mix of both, but one team definitely is favored on this list than the other here. But it's Carver Hagee at number 9 here. A perennial goal scorer. He I believe he had 20-something points last postseason when they made a Stanley Cup Final. He is back to those ways around 18 points, I believe, for this postseason so far for Carter Verhaeghe. He has been absolutely amazing. This sniper for the first line left wing spot for the Florida Panthers deserves this number 9 spot. He's been amazing this postseason as well. Been one of the key factors for the Florida Panthers and is going to be a huge factor for the Florida Panthers going forward. But I don't think we're at X Factor territory yet for each team here, but I think we're getting it soon here, as Zach Hyman is a huge piece for the Edmonton Oilers. This guy is a 50-goal scorer. The question for Zach Hyman is how much of that is him and how much of that is McDavid, and that's a fair question, and I think we'll talk about that a little bit more in the offseason if we can see a repeat of success with Zach Hyman, as he didn't have this success when he was in Toronto, and he played with some really, really great talent in Toronto, so he's turning into a fantastic goal scorer, really finding the paint, or really finding the crease, finding where to put the puck, and beats the goaltenders on the far side. Once McDavid beats 17 different defenders on the other side of the ice. It's a little bit of a hyperbole there, but you get the point. Zach Hyman is a fantastic finisher, with McDavid being a fantastic playmaker. So those two have really formed a fantastic partnership throughout the regular season, and it's continuing the playoffs with Zach Hyman having 14 goals, leading all skaters in goals in the playoffs. He's the number 8 best player in this Stanley Cup final. Going on, number 7 is Sam Reinhart. This guy was fantastic all regular season. I believe he had over 90 points in the regular season. He had 41 goals, if I'm not mistaken, in the regular season. He was a fantastic player, really came into himself in this regular season, and has continued it in the playoffs, has been a very great force for the Florida Panthers in the playoffs. This guy is a fantastic goal scorer and playing fantastically on that top line, knows exactly his job. He plays it to mere perfection, playing that 200-foot style of play. When the top line for the Florida Panthers is out on the ice, guys don't score against them. That goes for the top line and top defensive pair as well. So when you get that on the ice, it's 200-foot game. It's a fantastic forecheck. It's fantastic speed. It's fantastic physicality for those guys. So Sam Reinhart's the number 7 best player in the Stanley Cup final, in my opinion here. Moving on, we have Alexander Barkov, the Selke Award winner for this year. Alexander Barkov has always played fantastic 200-foot hockey. He's the best defensive forward in the NHL right now, and I don't know if that's really a debate. He is exactly what the Florida Panthers need from a captain. He leads by example to perfection, has been on this team since 2013 when he was picked 3rd overall by the Florida Panthers. And what an absolute amazing pick it has turned out to be. Alexander Barkov absolutely deserves everything, 2nd overall in the 2013 draft. Alexander Barkov has deserved every bit of success that he has found with the Florida Panthers. What a fantastic individual. He is coming in at number 6 on these rankings. And then our 5th best player is the young defenseman from the Edmonton Oilers. They picked him in the first round in 2018 and has turned provider ever since. I have him in a couple of jerseys in these pictures, if I'm going to be honest. I really don't like either. The only Oilers jersey I like is that middle one there that you're seeing. But as a little bit of me, I don't love the Oilers' 3rd jerseys in many of their seasons, but hey, that's just me. But going back to Evan Bouchard as a player, has the 3rd most points in this postseason, leads defenseman in goals, leads defenseman in assists, leads defenseman in points. He provides so much for this team, is a huge part of why that power play is the number 1 in the NHL in this postseason, has turned provider on plenty of occasions, and it's always, you see in the box score, McDavid, Draisaitl, Bouchard. McDavid, Hyman, Bouchard. Draisaitl, Nugent-Hopkins, Bouchard. He is always there assisting, helping out everybody, and is a fantastic defenseman on the other end of the ice as well. So he comes in at the number 5 player on the ice when it is down to the Stanley Cup final, and number 4 will be Matthew Tkachuk, the assistant captain for the Florida Panthers, has really came in for the Florida Panthers and been exactly what they need. He came in 2022 with that Jonathan Huberdeau trade. Both teams looking to shake things up for the Calgary Flames and Florida Panthers. This was also the time where Elias Lindholm wanted out and Johnny Gaudreau walked in free agency. So That top line leaves. Matthew Tkachuk joins the Florida Panthers and has, since he joined the Florida Panthers, led them to 2 Stanley Cup Finals. So very, very successful Matthew Tkachuk has been. We'll see if he can get a Stanley Cup and be the first of the Tkachuk family to bring home a Stanley Cup. That would be very interesting. Of course, Brady and his dad Keith playing in the league for so long. Matthew Tkachuk has been amazing. One of the best physical players in the NHL, really turning into kind of that rat of the NHL, but he plays that role to perfection, and honestly, I say that as a huge compliment because Brad Marchand and Tom Wilson have been known to do this for many, many years, and Matthew Tkachuk is kind of that new age, new generation of it, and he is doing it perfectly. He deserves to be the assistant captain for this Florida Panthers team, absolutely. But that's my number 4 player, and number 3 is, there is finally a goaltender. It's Sergei Bobrovsky, number 3 best player in the Stanley Cup Finals. He has led the Florida Panthers. He is, of course, you guys can probably predict that who I have 1 and 2, which means Sergei Bobrovsky is the top-ranked Panther, and in this top 10, we have, I believe, 6 Panthers and 4 Edmonton Oilers. So a little indication on, the teams and how I think both teams are built. But for the Sergei Bobrovsky, he has had such a fantastic postseason, saving he stole games 5 and game 6 against the New York Rangers. He has been near perfect in the last couple of games that he has gone out for. Sergei Bobrovsky faced Igor Shesterkin head-to-head, in my opinion, the best goaltender in the NHL, and beat him, straight up beat him. Played better in all 6 games than Igor Shesterkin did. So Sergei Bobrovsky absolutely deserves this number 3 spot. He was signed with the Florida Panthers for $10 million, and honestly, you would be hard done to catch me say that was a waste of money. $10 million for Sergei Bobrovsky, when you were looking at it a couple years ago, that was yikes. But now he has absolutely deserved the contract. Ever since he joined Florida, he has been elite goaltending. So Sergei Bobrovsky is the number 3 player in the Stanley Cup Finals. And when we get to number 2, it is Leon Draisaitl, which means number 1 is going to be Connor McDavid. But talking about Leon Draisaitl a little bit, what can this guy not do? He has one of the best shots in the league. He's one of the best playmakers in the league. He's an amazing skater. Has a great two-way ability. The assistant captain for the Edmonton Oilers absolutely deserves that A, and he deserves all the praise that he gets all the time. He is the second leading point getter in these playoffs, only behind the number 1 guy on this list here. And I mean, what more can you say about him besides Leon Draisaitl is having an elite postseason, was a little underwhelming for a few games in the Dallas Stars the series, but hey, what are you going to do? I mean, you're allowed to have a couple games off, maybe not in the postseason, and especially not in the Stanley Cup Final, but they got through the Dallas Stars, they beat them in 6, and now they're facing the Florida Panthers, and Leon Draisaitl is going to be one of the biggest factors for the Edmonton Oilers going into that series. And then my number 1 player, of course, it's Connor McDavid. He's number 1 because he's the number 1 player in the world. It doesn't matter who they're going up against. Connor McDavid will absolutely be the top player on the ice, no matter who is playing. If Connor McDavid has skates on, he is the best player. So in this series, of course, being the best player. Why is he the best player? Well, he had 132 points in the regular season, 100 assists exactly. One of only 5 guys to eclipse that 100 assist mark, joining Wayne Gretzky, Mario Lemieux, was it Bobby Orr, and Nikita Kucherov are the only other ones that were able to do it. And Connor McDavid joins that list, and it's a very impressive one. And on top of all of that, leads the entire NHL in postseason scoring. What more can you say about this guy? He has been insane for the Edmonton Oilers, deserving of all of the praise that he gets. And Connor McDavid is going to be the biggest factor for the Edmonton Oilers, and he's the reason that the Edmonton Oilers are going to have a lot of fans rooting for them, because they want to see greatness, and him winning his first Stanley Cup will absolutely be greatness. So I wrap up the talk of top 10 players in the Stanley Cup Finals. When I get back from my second break, we will be talking about how each team was assembled.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back to the GSMC Hockey Podcast. We're back from our second break of the night. We just got finished talking about the top 10 players in the Stanley Cup Final, and now we're talking about how each team in the Stanley Cup Final was assembled. And one team really favored the draft in building their team, and the other team kind of favored trades and free agency and waiver claims here. Of course, we're comparing the Edmonton Oilers to the Florida Panthers. The Edmonton Oilers really have a lot of homegrown talent, and their scouting and draft and development departments really deserve a lot of credit for the Stanley Cup Final run. When you're talking about the Edmonton Oilers, they have 2 first overall picks, and they have 7 first round picks on their roster right now that were all drafted by the Edmonton Oilers. Since 2011, that's the furthest back this goes. A lot of their first round talent has really developed and turned provider for them. In 2011, it was Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, who for the longest time looked like a bust, but in year 13 right now in the NHL, he looks like a fantastic player, and really it took him a while to get going, but since he's gotten going, he is amazing. Of course, he was in the middle of that first overall run by the Edmonton Oilers. Taylor Hall, Nugent-Hopkins, and Nail Yakupov going on each end of him. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, you could say, is the best of the 3 here, and I wouldn't argue with you too much. Of course, Taylor Hall has a Hart Trophy, so that's a little bit fair to talk about him, but as longevity goes and as individual and team success goes, I think Ryan Nugent-Hopkins might take the cake from those 3. And then you have Darnell Nurse in 2013. That was their first round pick, or for 7th overall in 2013. I think he was the 2nd defenseman off the board in that draft class. And then it's Leon Draisaitl in 2014 in that star-studded 2014 class with the 3rd overall pick. Connor McDavid, of course, 2015. We know he was the number 1 overall pick in that draft. A fantastic draft that included names like Mitch Marner, Jack Eichel, Sebastian Aho was in that class. A lot of notable names in the 2015 class, and he is still, of course, the best of all of the bunch here. 2018, it was Evan Bouchard with our first round pick. That was 10th overall. Philip Broberg, 8th overall in the first round in 2019, and Dylan Holloway in 2020, 14th overall. So 7 first round picks for the Edmonton Oilers. On the other side, for the Florida Panthers, Anton Lundell, Aaron Ekblad, and Alexander Barkov make up their first round picks on their team. Barkov 2nd overall, Ekblad 1st overall in 2014 in that same class of Leon Draisaitl, and in 2020 it was Anton Lundell as the first round 12th overall pick that they selected. Now for each team, for the Florida Panthers, they don't have a single player that they drafted between the rounds 2 through 7 on their team still, and Edmonton has 3 of them. They have Vincent Desharnais, they have their goaltender Stuart Skinner, and they have Ryan McLeod, who were all their own selections between the rounds 2 through 7. The Florida Panthers don't have any, which is shocking. They've done a lot of trading and done a lot of free agent signings that lead to that no 2 through 7 of their own picks, but it's still mind-boggling either way. And now when we're talking about free agency and waiver claims, this is where the bulk of the Florida Panthers team was made up. We already talked about Gustav Forsling being a waiver claim. He is by far their best acquisition pound for pound as it goes. Gustav Forsling don't have to give up anything, really don't have to sweat about a long contract negotiation either. In 2021, that's when they picked him up. But their free agency signings, the furthest one back is 2019. It's Sergei Bobrovsky for $10 million. Then you have Carter Verhaeghe, they signed from the Tampa Bay Lightning in 2020. Ryan Lundberg in 2020 as well. Nick Cousins in 2022. Both those guys won't be playing on the Florida Panthers. They probably won't be playing for the Florida Panthers in the Stanley Cup Final, as other guys have stepped up more for the Florida Panthers. But still very impressive free agency signings. And then Nico Mikola in 2023, OEL, and Dmitry Kulikov all in 2023. You also have Evan Rodriguez, Kevin Stenlund, and Anthony Stolarz in 2023 as well, were UFA signings. And then on the waiver claims, you have Gustav Forsling, Josh Mahura, Tobias Bjornfot for the Florida Panthers. Bjornfot and Mahura will probably not be playing in the Stanley Cup Finals, barring injury. And then the UFA signings for the Edmonton Oilers, it's a lot of their depth pieces are UFA signings, and one superstar in Zach Hyman. You saw he was ranked number 8th for my players in the Stanley Cup Final. He wasn't signed in 2021. That's wrong. But he was signed a couple years ago for the Edmonton Oilers. Derek Ryan was signed in 2021. Cody Ceci in 2021. Evander Kane was signed by the Edmonton Oilers. Matthias Janmark a couple of years ago. Calvin Pickard a couple years ago from, I think he came from the Avalanche, Calvin Pickard did. Or he played on the Avalanche sometime in his career. Maybe he came from the Hurricanes when they signed him. Connor Brown and Corey Perry were the two most recent. Of course, Corey Perry being in this offseason, they signed him. And then when you're going for trades, this is also a category where the Panthers kind of elected to stay towards when they were building their roster. Eetu Luostarinen is the furthest back the Florida Panthers go with trade accusations in 2020. Brandon Montour was a trade accusation in 2021. Sam Bennett, Sam Reinhart in 2021 as well. Matthew Tkachuk was in that Jonathan Huberdeau trade in 2022. Steven Lorentz, Vladimir Tarasenko, and Kyle Okposo were in 2024 or 2023. It is very impressive what Bill Zito has been able to do for the Florida Panthers in trades and UFA acquisitions. There's the word, I found it. Very impressive what he's been able to do, kind of working the phones, kind of working the contracts, being able to build this contender from ground up, as it was really from ground up when we looked at this roster in 2018, even as so far back to then where they weren't really competing on the biggest stage. But for the Florida Panthers, you have a lot of kind of big names that are stepping up for them from trades here. Warren Foegele has been a good name for the Edmonton Oilers. Brett Kulak has been important for them. Matthias Ekholm has been important for them. Adam Henrique has been important for them. Sam Carrick has been important for them on trades. So very, they have 6 guys on their team from trades. The Florida Panthers have 8 guys on their team from trades. When it comes to UFA signings, the Florida Panthers have 10 players on their team from trade or from UFA signings, and the Edmonton Oilers have 8. And then the Edmonton Oilers, of course, blow them out of the water with homegrown talent, those first-round picks and those depth picks as well. It shows that you could build a winning roster in multiple ways in the NHL, and no philosophy for building a team is wrong, really. You could build it from the draft, or you could build it from kind of getting established players, whether that's free agency or trades. The Florida Panthers electing to do the latter, and it has definitely worked in spades for them. The worry for the Florida Panthers, of course, is they have a lot of veterans on their team, is how I would put it nicely. Alexander Barkov's getting up there in age. Sam Reinhart is getting up there in age. Sam Bennett's getting up there in age. Vladimir Tarasenko's getting up there in age. Kyle Okposo's getting up there in age. Aaron Ekblad is getting up there in age. Oliver Ekman-Larsson, Dmitry Kulikov. I believe Gustav Forsling is... he's 27. Brandon Montour is 30. You have Dmitry Kulikov, who I mentioned earlier, 33. You have Nico Mikola, who is 28, getting up there. So for a lot of these defensemen and a lot of this Florida Panthers team, it's a lot older than the Edmonton Oilers. That's not going to affect the play on the ice tomorrow or throughout the series, but it definitely could affect them going forward and in future seasons. So that's something to look out for. That's the biggest difference in the two different philosophies. But it is interesting how each team built their roster, and I find that fascinating that both teams were able to build their rosters in completely different ways and get the same result, both of them winning the conference final and both of them going to face off against each other in the Stanley Cup final. I'm excited for that. That's tomorrow. But with that being said, we're going to take our third break of the night, and when I get back, we're going to be talking about the top storylines for the Stanley Cup final.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to the GSMC Hockey Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. We're talking preview of the Stanley Cup Final here, and this segment is going out to the top storylines of the Stanley Cup Final. The biggest storyline of the Stanley Cup Final is Connor McDavid, the legacy talks, the comparisons to Gretzky, the best player in the world, finally being able to prove it on the biggest stage in hockey has to offer of the Stanley Cup Final. That is the most exciting part of the Stanley Cup Final. Of course, the reason that a lot of guys are rooting for the Edmonton Oilers in this Cup Final is because of Connor McDavid here. I am so excited to see how he plays. I'm so excited to see how he plays in the Stanley Cup Final. He is definitely one of those guys that can just win a series by himself. We could kind of see that when it comes to the NBA Final. Luka Doncic seems like he can be a type of guy to win it by himself. I don't think it's the same level, though. I think Connor McDavid is the best player in hockey, and is the best player that hockey has seen since Mario Lemieux, maybe since Wayne Gretzky, and I would not argue with you too much if you were to say that. Connor McDavid is the greatest talent the hockey world has ever seen, and I truly believe that. And when it comes to Connor McDavid, him winning his first Stanley Cup will be absolutely monumental for the kid, and I can't wait to see that. So that's my number one storyline coming into the Stanley Cup Final. My number two storyline is you got to talk about the Canadian curse. No Canadian team has won a Stanley Cup Final while Gary Bettman has been the commissioner for the NHL. The Montreal Canadiens were the last team in 1993 to win the Stanley Cup Final, or the last Canadian team to win the Stanley Cup Final. For the Edmonton Oilers to be able to do it, there's been plenty of teams with a chance. It was the Canadiens in 21. It was the Canucks in 2011. It was the Oilers in 06. It was, I believe, 07 had a Canadian team as well. I'm just blanking on them, who they were. But for these Canadian teams, they just haven't been able to get it done in the Stanley Cup Final. Can the Edmonton Oilers become the first ones since the Montreal Canadiens in 1993 to do so? It will be so interesting to see if they are able to do so. That is why that is my second top storyline for the NHL Finals. My third is the Florida Panthers going back to the NHL Stanley Cup Final. They were there last year, faced off against the Vegas Golden Knights, and they were unable to beat the Vegas Golden Knights. But now they have a chance to go back-to-back and win on their second try. The Pittsburgh Penguins were the last to do it in 2009 after losing to the Detroit Red Wings in 2008. They had a chance to go in 2009 and get their revenge, and they were able to do so, winning that Stanley Cup Final. Of course, that was Sidney Crosby's first Stanley Cup Final of 3 of his career. And for the Edmonton Oilers, for the Florida Panthers, they definitely have a great chance. I believe they have a better matchup this time around than they did against Vegas. Vegas was such a super team last year. And for the Edmonton Oilers, I don't think that they're on the same level as that 2023 Vegas Golden Knights team. But only time will tell, and the Florida Panthers definitely can dictate that themselves. They definitely are a team that can win this on the bounce back, on the second try here. So that's something that I'm very interested in. Another storyline is Matthew Tkachuk and Sam Bennett. Both of these players played for the Calgary Flames for a while. Matthew Tkachuk, of course, playing most recently and getting traded directly from the Calgary Flames. He can go ahead and get some revenge for the Calgary Flames. Of course, if you guys don't know, the Calgary Flames and Edmonton Oilers have one of the richest rivalries in NHL history. It's called the Battle of Alberta, as that is the province that both of them share. And the Edmonton Oilers are not liked by the teams to the south of them in Calgary. But for Matthew Tkachuk and Sam Bennett, once you're in that rivalry, it never goes away from you. And these guys definitely are used to facing off against the Edmonton Oilers. And, of course, they're used to beating and playing physical against this Oilers team. So it's gonna be interesting to see what kind of flair that they bring into the Stanley Cup Finals with them, with that a little bit extra chip on their shoulder, as they are but they have an opportunity. They have an opportunity to kind of revenge their Calgary Flames arch nemesis in the Edmonton Oilers. I think a big storyline in the Stanley Cup Finals, moving on from the Battle of Alberta, is Stuart Skinner. Stuart Skinner needs to play amazing, and can he live up to that task? That's what I think is very interesting. With Stuart Skinner, not a fantastic goaltender historically, one of the worst in the Stanley Cup playoffs before this year. But for him, he definitely has the opportunity to right the ship, and he definitely has the opportunity at hand to go ahead and win the Edmonton Oilers the Stanley Cup Finals. He played fantastic in that last game against the Dallas Stars. I think he saved 38 of 39 shots. He was absolutely amazing, and they need that from Stuart Skinner. They need that version of Stuart Skinner when it's coming down to the Stanley Cup Finals. They're looking at that defense to. We talk about how amazing the Edmonton Oilers offense is, but when you get Darnell Nurse and Cody Ceci on the ice together, that's a shutdown pairing, and you have a fantastic third and fourth line for defense. Defensive-minded third and fourth line, as Adam Henrique's a great defensive guy, Connor Brown's a great defensive guy, Ryan McLeod can play good defense, and for the Edmonton Oilers, they're gonna need them in front of Stuart Skinner. You're going up against Sergei Bobrovsky, who is prone to stealing a game in the playoffs, and he definitely can against this Edmonton Oilers team. So for Stuart Skinner, you're going to need to match those blows and need to play competitive hockey against him, who Sergei Bobrovsky is having the playoff run of his life. He's playing out of his skates. Amazing. So for Stuart Skinner, he's going to need to match him, and it's going to be very interesting to see if he can. Of course, not having a fantastic postseason, Stuart Skinner, before that Dallas Stars series, but was able to turn it around a little bit, prove that he deserved to be the number one goaltender going into the Stanley Cup Final, and I'm very intrigued to see how he rises to the occasion. Another big name in this Stanley Cup Final is going to be Paul Maurice. That is the Florida Panthers head coach. This is his third attempt in the Stanley Cup Final. Has not won it the previous two times. He of course was with the Florida Panthers last year when they lost to the Vegas Golden Knights, but also in 2002, his first attempt at this, he lost to the Detroit Red Wings with the Carolina Hurricanes. You can't really blame the Carolina Hurricanes for losing to the Detroit Red Wings at the time, because that Detroit Red Wings team was one of the greatest teams that we've ever seen. Of course, winning. I think they won 3 cups in that span, if I'm not mistaken, and was such a legendary team. But they lost in 5 games in 2002. He was able to make it back with the Florida Panthers in 2023, unsuccessful, and now it's his third attempt at the Stanley Cup. And for for Paul Maurice, there's nothing that he wants more than to win the Stanley Cup. Getting a third opportunity is very rare. He cannot waste it for himself and for his legacy in the NHL. Another big name, of course, is Alexander Barkov. He is the longest tenured Florida Panther. He has been on this team since 2013, their second overall pick in that year, in that draft. He has kind of bled red and white, or whatever you want to say their colors are. He has bled it for the last 11 years of his life. He is a huge part of this organization, the captain for the Florida Panthers. Been through this organization through thick and thin, of course going through a lot of down years in the mid-2010s. So for Alexander Barkov, him going to a Stanley Cup final for the second year in a row, and for him to be able to win it is going to be huge for his legacy and for himself, who has been on this team for so long. But that'll wrap it up, the talks about the storylines going into the Stanley Cup final. I'm going to take my fourth and final break of the night, and then when I come back, it's predictions and it's full series breakdown time, and I'm excited to get into that with you guys when I get back from my fourth break on the GSMC Hockey Podcast. Alright, I am back for my fifth and final segment of the night, and final segment before we get into the Stanley Cup Finals tomorrow. Final previewing segment once I come back for the GSMC Hockey Podcast on Monday. We will be talking about some actual results instead of talking in theory here. But we're going to get right into my picks and predictions for the Stanley Cup Final, who I believe has the edge in this one and why I believe so. I'm going to just say it right out the gate here. I have the Florida Panthers beating the Edmonton Oilers in 6. The reason I believe that is when I go through the lines and when I go through the special teams and when I go through the goaltending matchup and when I go through everything besides the superstars, Florida Panthers are better. I believe that they had the edge in depth. I believe that they had the better second line. I believe that Connor McDavid is the greatest player of this generation, and to not say that the first line for the Oilers is better, it would be a pure mistake. However, everywhere else on the ice, I believe that the Florida Panthers have that edge on the Edmonton Oilers, and I think that that's going to be huge in a 7-game series. Another factor that goes into this decision is the Florida Panthers beating them twice in the regular season. Of course, regular season success doesn't go to talking about playoff success. We saw this with the Florida Panthers in their round 2 matchup against the Boston Bruins. They lost all 4 regular season games against the Boston Bruins and were able to beat that team in 6. So it doesn't matter too much regular season success, but what I saw in those regular season matchups is very telling to how I think that the Stanley Cup Final is going to play out. The Florida Panthers' depth beat the Edmonton Oilers in those 2 games, and I think that is going to prove true through a 7-game series as well. It was also Sergei Bobrovsky playing some pretty good hockey, lining up 2 goals against average, having a .970 save percentage in those 2 games. I think that we're going to see that from Sergei Bobrovsky as well. He always plays very well against the Oilers. I remember him when he was on the Blue Jackets. Every time the Edmonton Oilers were to come into town, he would still play out of his shoes, and he would be able to steal a game for the Blue Jackets against the Oilers. And he's doing the same thing, and I expect him to do the same thing when he's with the Panthers here in the Stanley Cup Final especially. Sergei Bobrovsky is a huge reason of why we are not seeing the New York Rangers in this Stanley Cup final right now. That is a huge point to this goaltender and to Sergei Bobrovsky and to this matchup here. You're also looking at the goaltender on the other side of the other end of the ice, 200 feet away, is Stuart Skinner. And you cannot convince me that Stuart Skinner can beat the play of Sergei Bobrovsky. Granted, last series I would have been shocked if you told me that Stuart Skinner was going to outplay Jake Onger, but 38 shots and 38 to 10 shots later in a game 6, turns out I am mistaken. Jake Onger, 800 save percentage in that game. Stuart Skinner had around a 970, or I believe it was a 971 save percentage in that game. So he definitely can outplay a goaltender of this caliber. Of course, I believe Jake Onger and Sergei Bobrovsky are pretty similar caliber of goaltenders. But when you're talking about a 7-game series, once again, I think that Sergei Bobrovsky gives such an edge to the Florida Panthers over it, and I believe that he will be able to steal more games than he gives up. I believe that Connor McDavid is going to be able to will the Edmonton Oilers to wins in a couple of these games. It's more about the supporting cast around Connor McDavid if they are able to maintain such a high level alongside McDavid. And I don't know if I believe in Evan Bouchard when he gets a Matthew Tkachuk in his nose. Or I don't know if I believe in a Leon Draisaitl when he has to go up against an Ekblad and Gustav Forsling top pairing when he's down low. And if there's any penalty kill that's able to stop this Edmonton Oilers power play, it is the Florida Panthers. Now, granted, all of this could be wrong. The best 2 players on the ice for the Stanley Cup Finals is going to be on the side of Edmonton. And we talk about this so much. Those are players that can win a series for the Oilers. We saw this so many times in this postseason. I think McDavid and Draisaitl are the reason they beat the Vancouver Canucks. I think that they beat the Kings. No, they do not. They don't beat any of these teams. They are not a playoff team without Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. That's how important these 2 players are for. But I believe that if they didn't play at such a level and they weren't just such a step above, if they were just, if they were Toronto Maple Leaf level superstar talent, and I'm looking at you, Austin Matthews, in the postseason. I'm looking at you, Mitch Marner, in the postseason. William Nylander in the postseason. If they were that level, I don't think that they get. I think that they are hard done by the LA Kings, and they don't get past the Vancouver Canucks, and they don't get past the Dallas Stars. These 2 players can absolutely take the series for themselves and win a Stanley Cup. The only problem with this is in my lifetime, I haven't seen that happen. But there isn't the talent of these 2 individual players on any team that I've ever watched in my life. The only comparable team is the Sidney Crosby Penguins. But in 16-17, or in 15-16 and 16-17, both those teams were so good. You also had Chris Letang, you had Marc-Andre Fleury, you had Matt Murray, who played amazing in that second cup run. You had Jake Gensel. You had they had another Patrick Hornquist, who was an amazing forward. They had these guys that were. I would say Chris Letang is better than Evan Bouchard. I would say that Marc-Andre Fleury or Matt Murray in those 2 runs were miles above Stuart Skinner. I would say that Patrick Hornquist is a better player than Zach Hyman, and I would say that Jake Gensel is a better player than Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. So the supporting cast for those Penguins teams were way better. I have never seen in my lifetime 2 players carry a team to a Stanley Cup final, and I'm still skeptical. That's why I'm picking the Panthers in 6. But if there's any 2 players that have ever played in my lifetime, it would be these 2 that are together on the Edmonton Oilers right now. Connor McDavid is a level above any player that any of us have ever watched, unless you were alive in 1980. Wayne Gretzky is the only player comparable to these guys. Or not to these guys, to Connor McDavid. What Connor McDavid does on the ice are things that even Wayne Gretzky weren't able to do. The toe drag for that Dallas Stars, that opening goal against the Dallas Stars, the toe drag into 3 defenders, backhand, roofs it over the shoulder of Jake Onger. That's stuff that I've never seen in my life. And if you show me one Wayne Gretzky highlight that has that, I will succeed. But all of this is to say that I do believe, top to bottom, the Florida Panthers are a better team than the Edmonton Oilers. But the Edmonton Oilers can absolutely come out and prove me wrong. And that's why I think I'm so excited to watch this game 1. Because if there is a game for the Edmonton Oilers to come out and prove me wrong, I think it will be this game. I think this is the game that they're going to be looking to beat Bobrovsky in. This is what makes this series so exciting. I cannot wait to watch this game 1 tomorrow night. But that'll wrap it up for this Friday GSMC Hockey Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Thank you guys for all your support. If you like the show, don't forget to like it and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, on any of those social media platforms. We got it. And thank you all for your support once again. Have a absolutely amazing evening, wonderful weekend, and enjoy this game 1 of the Stanley Cup Finals, because I sure will.
Let's go. I wake up to a